No one expected such a strong bond to form. As the cubs got bigger, they moved into an enclosure with other tigers, and the cat took the separation hard. 3 years later, she reunited with them, and the unimaginable happened. Sammy opened the first door to the enclosure, and Nova stayed close to her. The air was filled with tension as the zookeeper clung to the hope that this was the right thing to do. An unlikely reunion between two tigers and a cat was about to unfold in front of her eyes. After 3 years, would Ash and Zara, the two tigers, even recognize the little black cat who had once been their mother? Sammy slowly lifted the hatch to release the tigers, and Nova backed away, unsure of the situation. Zara was the first to enter the enclosure, shortly followed by Ash. They stared at the black cat and sniffed the air. Sammy held her breath. There were many ways this could go wrong, and her mind was racing through all the possible outcomes. Slowly, the tigers approached the cat who had cared for them and ensured their survival. Sammy was ready to grab Nova if things went awry. But then the unimaginable happened. As Sammy watched the scene unfold with tears in her eyes, she was filled with awe. Sammy had not only been a zookeeper for a few years, but she lived and breathed her work. Not so long ago, she'd unexpectedly ended up with a companion at work too. Out of all the animals she could be caring for, she'd found herself with a little black cat to look after. A couple of months ago, a skinny-looking cat had strolled into the keeper's office and had never left. Everyone had fallen in love with her, and when the little cat wouldn't leave, they decided she could be an unofficial zoo mascot. They set up a bed for her, food and water bowls, and gave her regular treats. Sammy had decided on the name Nova, and soon the skinny cat seemed very happy with her new life of comfort. So happy, in fact, that she seemed to gain weight very quickly. It was only when Sammy noticed how round Nova's belly had gotten that alarm bells started to ring. The little cat was pregnant. Sadly, though, Nova had lost all but one of her kittens just 2 weeks ago, which is how Sammy had found herself in the pet store on her way to work. She wanted to get Nova something nice. The poor cat hadn't been herself since losing her babies. She took great care of the one kitten she had, but it was clear that she knew the others were gone. She barely moved from her bed and wasn't interested in food. Armed with various snacks and a new toy, Sammy walked through the zoo towards the offices, hoping that at least one of the things she'd bought would interest Nova. Sammy always loved walking through the zoo before it opened for the day, just listening to all the animals and watching the place come alive. But as she walked by the tiger enclosure, a noise made her stop. There was whimpering and growling coming from the enclosure, and with 2 new tiger cubs in there, Sammy thought that she had best check out what was going on. The new mom and her 2 cubs had been placed in their own enclosure where they were safe from the group but could still see them. Maybe someone had come to see the kittens, and their mother acted perhaps a little overprotective. Sammy had never imagined that their own mother would turn on them. As she came into full view of the enclosure, she could see Zara and Ash, the 2 tiny cubs huddled in the corner. The newborn cub's mother was struggling to adapt to her new role and unexpectedly turned on her own babies. Sammy, the young zookeeper, saw the mother growling and baring her teeth at the defenseless cubs. Realizing the cubs needed to be removed, Sammy lured the mother away so she could safely retrieve the cubs. With the 2 tiny bundles in her arms, she headed to the office, knowing they would need blankets, milk, and round-the-clock care to survive. At that moment, thoughts of Nova had completely vanished from the young woman's mind. In the office, Sammy grabbed one of the clean blankets that had been bought before Nova gave birth and laid the little cubs on the table. The pair stayed huddled together, not yet old enough to properly move around or open their eyes. She instructed her co-workers to find bottles and milk and get more blankets. But as everyone fussed around, all the commotion caught the attention of someone else. Nova had begun to stir, and checking that her kitten was fast asleep, she stretched out and then began to weave in and out of everyone's legs, desperate to see what was happening. It didn't take long for the clever cat to work out that something was happening on the table. So with her usual skill and grace, she sprang up from the floor and landed near Sammy. Before anyone could stop the curious little cat, she wandered over to the cubs and sniffed at them before beginning to groom them. No one could believe what they were seeing. With no fuss, Nova had accepted the cubs and now seemed to be trying to look after them. A strange thought entered Sammy's head. What if Nova adopted the orphan tiger cubs? After losing her kittens, it might provide some relief for the heartbroken cat. It was a risky move with another kitten involved, and the cubs would soon outgrow both Nova and her kitten. But as the zookeeper watched the beautiful black cat carefully licking each of the cubs, she knew it was worth a shot. The cubs would still need to be bottle-fed, but with Nova taking care of them, they wouldn't be so totally reliant on human intervention. As she told everyone her idea, they all agreed that although it wasn't conventional, it was definitely worth a shot. So, as some of the keepers set about getting an enclosure ready for Nova and the cubs, Sammy watched the loving cat cuddle up to the cubs while gently purring. It was decided to place Nova, her kitten, and the 2 cubs in one of the enclosures usually kept for veterinary care, away from the public. The cubs had been attracting a lot of visitors, but no one knew how the public would react to a cat raising 2 tiger cubs. So, while everyone settled into the new routine, it was best to keep them away from the rest of the zoo. Thankfully, Nova took her new role with ease. With 3 babies to care for, the little cat seemed to bounce back to her usual self. She would groom and cuddle with the cubs and the kitten, and when the tigers opened their eyes and started to walk around more, everyone watched in awe as they dutifully followed their adoptive mother around, learning how to play, fight, and wrestle with one another. When Nova grew tired of their boisterous behavior, she would pick them up by their scruffs and carry them to bed. The zoo had to explain why the tiger cubs were no longer on display. Sammy received many inquiries and offers for the cubs, but she reiterated that they were happy and thriving at the zoo. Under Nova's care, the cubs were doing well, but were outgrowing her and becoming tiring for her to handle. To ease the burden, it was decided that at 9 weeks old, one of the other keepers would adopt Nova's kitten, leaving just the tiger cubs in her care. They had no idea if it would work, but at that age, kittens were fine to be separated from their mom, whereas tigers usually stayed with their mom until they were around 18 months old. Thankfully, taking the kitten away from Nova didn't seem to have any negative impact. She still had 2 lively tiger cubs to take care of, a responsibility the little cat took seriously. The cubs were full of energy, but now they were getting older, they seemed to respect Nova's boundaries more. They knew their mom had had enough and were happy to leave her alone and play together instead. The 3 of them still all cuddled as they slept, though. Even when the cubs grew to twice Luna's size, she would still groom them and tell them off with a quick swipe of her paw if they were misbehaving or being too rough. No one could believe just how well their plan had worked out. Luna had done an amazing job raising the cubs, and in turn, they had eased the sadness she felt at losing most of her litter. When the time came to move the tiger cubs, Zara and Ash, back to the main zoo, their separation from Luna, a little cat who had formed a strong bond with them, was tough. Luna spent her days pacing back and forth in the office, crying loudly and trying to reach the tiger enclosure. Sammy, the keeper, suggested letting Luna visit Zara and Ash occasionally to ease the pain of separation. This way, the cubs could still spend time with Luna before returning to the other tigers. It seemed like the perfect solution, and the other keepers agreed. However, Sammy's manager didn't like the idea and wouldn't agree to it. Even worse, he said that Luna could no longer live at the zoo. Her behavior was disruptive, and she would need to be rehomed. The young zookeeper couldn't believe what she was hearing. The zoo was more than likely the only home Luna had ever had. She couldn't just be rehomed with anyone. They wouldn't understand what the little cat had been through. Sammy decided that the cat could come and live with her. In time, Luna's behavior settled down. The little cat had a happy life with Sammy, and the more time that passed, the more she seemed to accept that Cleo and Ash were a part of her past. The young zookeeper still often wondered what a reunion between them all would be like, though. It seemed the bond between Luna and the cubs would still be strong, given the important role she had played in their upbringing and protection. The zookeeper planned to reunite Luna, a cat, with her adopted tiger, babies, Cleo and Ash, after 3 years apart. Her new manager suggested it, and precautions were to be taken to ensure Luna's safety. Sammy felt a mix of tension and excitement as she agreed to bring Luna into work for the reunion. However, she was worried about potential risks, knowing that she had fought for the reunion. The next day, Sammy took Luna into the office that she'd once called her home. Everyone was so happy to see the little cat again, and Luna lavished in all the attention that was being poured on her. Even Sammy's new manager was excited to meet the cat she'd heard so much about. For the rest of the day, the zookeeper tried to focus on her job, but it was hard when she knew what was coming at the end of the day. Before she knew it, the zoo was closing, and the last of the visitors were making their way toward the exit. It was time to reunite the cat with Cleo and Ash. Everyone gathered around, keen to see the reunion and hoping it went as planned. Sammy began to worry that she was doing the wrong thing, but as she stepped inside the enclosure, Luna followed close behind. Would the tigers remember Luna? What if something went wrong? With shaking hands, Sammy lifted the hatch that would allow Ash and Cleo into the enclosure. She held her breath and waited. First to appear was Cleo, quickly followed by Ash. The siblings had always been close, and it was rare for one to go somewhere without the other. The young zookeeper was poised and ready to grab Luna if something went wrong. As the tigers approached, sniffing the air, the little cat began to look away. Was she scared of the tigers she'd raised? Luna locked eyes with the two tigers, and Sammy dared not move. Slowly, the cat padded forward toward Cleo and Ash, and then something unimaginable happened. At the same time, both tigers began to affectionately rub up against the little cat who had once been their mom. Luna purred happily and rubbed her head on the tigers excitedly. Before long, Luna found herself engulfed in the tiger embrace as both Cleo and Ash snuggled with her and licked her, being as careful as possible and recognizing that Luna was far smaller than them. It was the reunion Sammy had always hoped for, and she watched with tears in her eyes. From then on, Luna had monthly visits with Cleo and Ash as the family got a chance to be together again. All three were a testament to love having no boundaries and the ability to create your own family in hard times. What an incredible story! If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. See you in the next video.